I do want to ask you a question about that because after you finish, because I asked Michael Knowles the same question.
Sure.
I want to see what your answer would be, but go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm basically done. I mean, I'm
okay.
And it's the sports stick thing. Most of these guys in the burbs are still pathetic, lifeless simps who have had the spirit and the manliness driven out of them by being henpecked every day. And it's very easy to get control of that situation because women naturally are hardwired to respect men, but they won't do the simple. And this is not what about the men though, but there are legitimate cucks out there. And even if you made divorce illegal, they're still going to have miserable lives because they're not going to take control of their home. Their wives just won't be allowed to leave them.
Yeah. Here's the video I did for Andrew about what about the men though.
Let's see.
Funny.
Jesus can save these hoes' soul, okay? But men are not going to be able to save these hoes in the world. And women are not going to be able to save these hoes in the world. And it sure would be nice if some of them actually faced the consequences for their actions, were held to account without a what about the Mendo argument from commentators like you, Lauren.
We the best music. Jesus can save his breezy soul, okay, but men are not gonna be able to save these breezes from the world, and breezes are not gonna be able to save these breezes in the world. It sure would be nice if some of them actually face the consequences of their actions, were held to account without a word about the men. No argument from female commentators like you, Lauren.
Well done.
That was funny.
Did he like that?
He did. He laughed at it.
Yeah.
So I was with Pearl last March at Daily Wire asking Michael Knowles the questions, right, on the interview. I asked him this question. Let's say your son gets married. His wife has an affair. The child is not his, right? Would you support him in getting a divorce? Because according to the Bible, sexual immorality, Jesus says it's really clear. Unless you can give your wife a letter of divorce for sexual immorality, everything else is considered adultery, right? Michael Knowles said no. He would not support that. He would not support his son getting a divorce, and there's no divorce. You got to save the family. Basically, he would have to raise that kid. Like,
yeah.
How do you sell that to men?
Well, I'm not interested in how to sell it to men. That's any more than our Lord says when he walks from town to town, and he says, "Hey, if they don't hear us, shake the dust from your sandals and go to the next town. They're lost." So at a certain point, I care enough to say it once. I'll answer the question and say it once here. I don't give too many fucks if people aren't willing to hear it. Same thing with Andrew Wilson, same thing with Michael Knowles. So I want people to hear the truth and have a kind of Martin Heidegger called it an attunement for it.
Yeah.
If they're too far gone, nothing I can do. So the teaching down from the apostles, there's 2 times our Lord addresses this in the gospel. One's in Matthew, one's in Luke. Yeah. Now, there's the porneia exemption in one. In the other one, there's no exemption at all. He says a man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. Mm-hmm. So the that's, I forget, Matthew or Luke, which one's the one without the exception?
Luke is the one without the exception. It's Matthew that's with the exception.
Okay, thanks. So that's helpful. So the Lucan teaching is the one that apostolic tradition, whenever we have in the synoptic gospels, our Lord saying basically the same thing. From the early patristic fathers, I don't mean the medieval church that everyone's been sort of brainwashed to think is corrupt. I mean the earliest fathers, 100 AD, 200 AD, 300 AD, guys like Augustine, Ambrose, Jerome, John Chrysostom, Basil the Great, Gregory of Nazianzus, the ballers, based as base can get in the Christian tradition. Right away, the original 8 doctors, they always choose to go with the more strict construction. And so from Christian time immemorial, from the time our Lord went back up to heaven, Pentecost, birthday of the church, the strict construction has always been go with the Lucan teaching and no exemption. So, so it's when you ask a Catholic like my friend Michael Knowles or me, it's not like, well, what's your opinion? It's just, well, there is no. It's not that I don't believe in divorce. I think Michael Knowles said this to you then too. It's that there's no such thing, and then people go.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said exactly that. There's no such thing as divorce. I'm like,
right. Because it's just adultery if you divorce and remarry. Now, the way it's a whole. I'm not trying to make everyone necessarily hear how all the sacraments work, but if you just get divorced and you don't remarry, like my maternal grandparents are divorced, right? Both Catholic. My grandmother never remarried, so a divorce isn't. It's not. It doesn't represent the porneia that divorce and remarriage does. My grandfather did remarry. That's where shit gets messed up, because then you're talking about, not in his case, but multiple, second set of kids and all that.
Yeah.
The same problem that you're decrying in the first place, because the woman committed adultery and has a set of kids that's extraneous to the family. Well, the point is, people always go, okay, that's fair enough. Okay, the tradition checks out. You guys just don't acknowledge such a thing as divorce and remarriage exists. That's just adultery. Well, what about annulment? Annulment, like because I was a contract attorney for a year.
Yeah.
Contract can't be like voided unless there's something at the time of the formation that led to an ostensible appearance of a true contract that never was. So like, fraud in the inducement of the contract or force. Those are two conditions which will, to us, because we live in space and time, looks like the invalidation of a contract, but really fraud in the inducement or force, those just mean someone had a gun to their head. They never committed the act of will animating the stroke of the pen in the first place. It wasn't a legit contract.
They did it at being like forced to do it.
Right. So like a shotgun wedding.
Yeah.
Not a real wedding. That's the same thing as like
under duress.
You're
under duress.
Precisely. So that's all you can get. It doesn't matter how big a monster your wife turns into over the course of marriage. If you entered into marriage with a woman and the elements of marriage were there on the day when you said I do, doesn't matter how horrible she turns into, or maybe she turns into, a witch or an adulteress or whatever. Like, it's just a statement of fact that marriage exists. You're married before God. It's eternal until death do you part. But even if you married a really nice person and she gets nicer and nicer every day in marriage, if you had one of the elements missing, she didn't intend to really be married for life, or she didn't intend to bring kids fruitfully from the union, or one of the other elements, then you could divorce her, and it wouldn't be a divorce, it would be an annulment, even if you didn't want to. So I understand people get hung up on it. Okay,
so annulment is different than divorce within the Catholic Church, but legally speaking, it would be if a couple got annulled in the Catholic Church, they still be getting divorced with the state, correct?
Sure, yeah, because the state, as I said before, the state is for the reasons that I had no problem with your prescription, not the arbiter of what's a natural marriage or a sacramental marriage.
Okay. So in that case, like, so if your son got with the woman and she ended up getting pregnant by someone else, they would have an annulment. And that was something that would be something that you could live with.
Well, no, she would only be allowed an annulment. This is why I said it's there are hard answers in the gospel. She would only be allowed an annulment if she had planned to, from the outset, like as she was saying, I do, where I'll keep you exclusively repudiating all others, or whatever the language is.
Yeah.
Because that is part
forsake all others. Yeah.
Yeah. Forsake all others. Sorry. And she was crossing her fingers and saying, no, the second I get a chance, I'm going to go commit adultery with, my waiter at the Olive Garden or whatever. Then yeah, that would be annullable. But you'd have to be able to demonstrate that dated to the wedding. If she was nice on the honeymoon, and then the second you get back to your home you're going to live in together, decides she's going to have commit adultery, then you're out of luck. It just is what it is. So it's that contract principle of If you had a real marriage, there's nothing you can do about it. Now there's ways to mitigate the damage, I guess, but that's the answer Knowles gave. It's the answer I give.